We're shown a flashback of the past where Lino, the mother of all spirits, tells the spirits that she's going to Delsgate. Noskelia, the father of the gods, suddenly appears and announces that Lino has been chosen to bear a special child that would defeat the demon king Anos. However, Lino refuses, but Noskelia attempts to impregnate her against her will. Just a moment later, Anos arrives with one of his demon generals, a formidable man named Shin Reglia, and rescues Lino by destroying the physical body of Noskelia. He asks Shin to watch over her, but Lino refuses. However, she finally agrees when Anos tells her that it's a long way to Delsgate and Noskelia could easily resurrect himself and try impregnating her with the divine child. On their journey back to Delsgate, Lino is surprised at how gentle and caring Shin is. They befriend each other along the way, but on their way back to the spirit forest, they encounter some spirit who inform Lino that the spirit forest is being destroyed. Lino senses a hidden presence and challenges the stranger, but it turns out to be a kid named Anoshu Political. In the present day, Anos is seen strolling into the Demon King Academy. He runs into some members of his fan club alongside Sasha and Misha Necron on the way. He notices that Sasha has gotten a new hair ribbon, but Sasha blushes at this. Misha, her twin sister, points out that Sasha is embarrassed by this, and Anos ranks her ribbon at the bottom of the middle-class ribbons in Delsgate with the thought that it would make her feel better, but Sasha feels humiliated by this. Misha sighs at this and tells Anos that noticing things way too much could get him in trouble. Meanwhile, Misa arrives with Lei, and the other members of the fan club tease them about the duo coming together, but Misa denies anything going on between them out of embarrassment. Later on, their homeroom teacher arrives in class and introduces two new students for Hero Academy who turn out to be Eleanor Bianca and her daughter, whom she had rescued, Zethia Bianca. Eleanor and Zethia take a seat beside Anos before thanking him and asking him if they could join his team. Erdome Dejon, the new homeroom teacher, born before the 7 demon lords, lived for over 2,000 years as a member of the 4 evil royals, tells the class that Anos is the real demon lord and not Avos Dilhivia. Erdome asks him to address the class, but Anos humbly tells them that he doesn't expect them to treat him differently. Before returning to his seat, Anos asks Erdome why he's living in another human's body by revealing him to be Noskelia, the father of the gods who had tried impregnating Lino, the mother of the spirits, 2,000 years ago. After giving him a serious spanking and killing him in front of the entire class, Anos resurrects him and returns to his seat, but to the bewilderment of the class, Noskelia continues the class like nothing serious had happened. Later on, Anos tells his friends and subordinates that the only reason why Noskelia would resort to teaching in the academy would be because he had promised someone. He tries to discover who Noskelia was doing a favor by teaching at the Demon Academy, and he eventually finds out that Noskelia was trying to fulfill a promise to the child of God that had been destined to find him. He shares his thoughts with his subordinates, and Sasha asks what he plans to do about this, but Anos vows to find this child of God and put them in their place. His subordinates agree to split into groups to discover who the child of God could possibly be, and Anos sets out to do some research. Before Eleanor sets out to carry out some research, she gets a message from the 3 reincarnations of Hero Canon who tell her that they had noticed the creation of a strange spell and the presence of some strange people in Delsgate. While this occurs, Misa reports to Lei and tells him that she had found no information on the foretold child of God, and she wonders who the person could possibly be. Lei tells her to stay as far away from the battle as possible and collects 1/2 of the necklace he had previously gifted her. He also tells her that he would protect her wherever she needed him to, or even run 1,000,000 miles if he ever caught word of her being in danger, but Misa tells him that she feels the exact same way and they share a kiss. A dark figure steps out and introduces himself as Jurad Azrima. Meanwhile, Anos tells his fan club that he plans on organizing a special parade to reveal that he is the newly reincarnated Demon King. He also asks them to compose a special number that would unite humans and demons as they would be rendering it on that day, but they are suddenly interrupted by Sasha and Misha, who inform them some of Anos' subordinates have been taken down by an unknown assaulter. Misha and Sasha inform Anos that they're going to discover who the villain is, but Anos warns them that they would probably be facing a demon general from over 2,000 years ago. However, Misha and Sasha are not fazed by this, and they rush off to the aid of their other companions. After they leave, Anos rushes into his castle and meets Melhes battling with a stranger. Unfortunately, Melhes is struck down with 1 blow as soon as he arrives. The stranger, who introduces himself as Zake Ozma, casts a spell on Melhes that restricts him from being reincarnated. However, Anos smugly tells Zake that as soon as he kills him, Melhes could easily revive himself since he had stopped time before his death. He also realizes that Zeke is a demon general who served under Erdome and was now working for Noskelia, the father of the gods. Noskelia had in turn granted him the ability to withstand the effects of time. Zeke tells Anos that he would admit defeat if Anos answers all 3 of his questions with 18 guesses, but Anos would momentarily lose his powers for 5 seconds if he missed any of the questions after using up his guesses. Anos agrees to Zeke's terms and conditions and they sign a contract. After answering Zeke's first two questions, Anos discovers that the child of God is one of his subordinates. Zeke asks him to predict who it is, and Anos chooses Misa, but Zeke denies this. He also chooses Misha and Sasha because he assumes that the divine twins who were born with divine intent would probably be more likely since Misa had been ruled out. He suddenly realizes that Zeke had given himself false memories in an attempt to win regardless of his answers, but Zeke tells him that he found out a little too late because he had already lost as soon as he signed the contract. Zeke attacks Anos instantly and tries taking advantage of the fact that he had lost control of his powers for 5 seconds, but Anos survives the fatal blow and kills Zeke before reviving Melhes. He tells Melhes to assist the others in battle and dashes out in search of his comrades. Meanwhile, Lei and Misa encounter a stranger who tells them that he works under one of the 4 evil royals and he has been ordered to steal Misa's source. He further reveals that Misa is the child of Lino, the mother of all spirits, and her source could be used to control other spirits. The stranger almost makes good on his promise, but Lei rises to Misa's defense and defeats him despite all odds. Later on, Misha and Sasha are seen assisting Revis, the third-year student who leads the demons in their inter-campus competition. While Sasha heals Revis with healing magic, he tells them that their homeroom teacher, Ms. Manu, has been captured by Reincarnates, who happens to be a female member of the 4 evil royals. Revis reveals that he has put a tracking spell on Rinka, and they could easily discover her whereabouts while using the spell. Misha and Sasha go after Rinka, and they succeed in catching up to her. Rinka reveals that she had only used Ms. Manu to lure them away from Anos, and she planned to fuse their sources before making them the vessel of Avos Dilhivia, the new demon king. Sasha and Misha are infuriated by her words, and Sasha attacks her, but she is no match for Reincarnates, the 4th evil royal who had existed for over 2,000 years. Misha cries with rage at her sister's battle wounds. Misha attacks Rinka with her formidable ice magic, but she is defeated by Rinka, who diverts her powers and pierces her with her ice crystals. Rinka laughs wickedly with high hopes that she has won the battle, but she is surprised when Misha revives herself and demonstrates her true mythical prowess. Rinka is stunned by the depth of Misha's powers, and the two brace themselves for a ferocious battle. Meanwhile, Eleanor and Zisha are engaged in a fierce battle with Zabrogeist, a lieutenant under the Scarlet King, who happens to be another member of the 4 evil royals. Zabro attempts to steal Eleanor's source by draining her and Zisha's powers, but Eleanor manages to defeat him at the last minute before revealing that the true secret behind human magic is emotions, and she would never allow others to gain hold of her powers just so they could turn Zisha and her other children into puppets. After Anos and his subordinates had finished conquering their opponents, they gather around for a meeting, and Lei shows Anos the other half of Mrs. Sword that he had wrested from their opponent. Anos collects the swords and joins the two halves together, and it turns out to be the sword of Shinreglia, one of his demon generals from 2,000 years ago. They're all puzzled by this revelation when Anos suddenly smirks and tells his subordinates that their next training field is a harness. Upon their arrival at a Harthern, Anos' fan club jump with excitement at the fact that they had just teleported with Anos, especially since sharing the same air with him could be classified as a first kiss. Anos tells his subordinates that he'll be heading into town to get information on the location of the spirits, but he runs into a girl named Lena who is being attacked by some Wake humans. After Anos rescues her, Lena reveals that she had lost all her memories, but the only thing she could remember is her name. She also reveals that during her stay at the town's tavern, she had heard all sorts of information. Anos asks Lena if she knows how to get to the spirit forest, but Lena reveals that the only way you could see the spirits is if they're so happy that they decide to come out from their hiding place. She also reveals that the spirits are always in a joyous mood whenever there's an eclipse, but prophecy had recently been released which stated that an eclipse would occur in a fortnight. However, Anos tells Lena that he doesn't have that much time, so he speeds up the occurrence of the eclipse. After the eclipse occurs, Lena asks Anos if she can accompany him, but Misha advises him against this, especially since she could turn out to be an enemy. However, Anos tells her that he senses no evil intent in her and allows Lena to accompany him to the borders of the spirit realm. When they arrive, Anos' fan club moves around in a frenzy, and Anos wonders what the excitement's all about. He is suddenly approached by one of the girls who give him a strange object that she calls the Anasu's fan club. She further reveals that they had gotten it from a Taravan in town, but as soon as Anos hands it back to her, her face goes red with embarrassment, and she rushes back to the other girls to tell them that Anos had touched her indirectly. The spirits appear at that moment and tease the girls while expressing how amused they were by their tactics. Anos recognizes a spirit named Tithi and calls out to her. He asks her if she can lead them to the spirit forest. Anos waits behind as his subordinates leave before telling an unknown presence that he could reveal himself. Noskelia, who was still in possession of Erdomaid's body, steps out of a fog and tells Anos that he prefers to stay in the background. Upon their arrival in the spirit forest, the spirits tell Anos that the 4 evil royals were at the Spirit Academy, and Anos asks to be led to them. On their way to the Spirit Academy, the spirits study Lena and comment about how she looks so much like Lino, the mother of spirits, but they sadly admit that Lino had been dead for over 2,000 years. Misa is saddened by this as she reveals that she had only recently found out that Lena was her mother and she was hoping to see her on this trip. The spirits suddenly flock to her side and sniff the air around her. They tell her that she smells a lot like Lino, and Misa is gladdened by this. After they arrive at the Spirit Academy, they encounter Gilishris, the Scarlet Monument King who happens to be a member of the Four Evil Royals. Anos questions him for sending Zeke to his demise, but Gilishris tells him he didn't mean for things to go that way. Anos notices Aegis Code, the King of the Netherlands, and confronts him for joining hands with the Four Evil Royals, but Aegis tells him that things were not exactly what they seemed. Lena suddenly remembers Union, a member of the Spirit Academy, and calls out to him. Union turns out to be a talking tree that bolts the doors of the Spirit Academy. He informs them that they would not be allowed exit from the Spirit Academy if they didn't take a particular test, and only those that score 90 marks could exit the building. He also tells them that their spirits would be captured by the Demon Fox if they failed to pass the trials. However, they would be granted an audience with the Spirit King if they passed 3 trials. But Anos is not fazed by this, and he assures Union that they would all get perfect scores on the test. Misha tells Anos to speak for himself cause she was not so good with books, but Anos promises to help them. Gilishris laughs at this and tells Anos that they could never win. He also coerces Anos to sign a contract with him. He tells Anos that he would claim his powers if any of his subordinates failed the test. However, he would tell Anos who he is working for if Anos' team passes the test. After his bet with Gilishris, Anos spends the next week drilling all forks of knowledge from the Book of Spirits into his subordinates. While poring over the books, Anos realizes that there is no written word on Lena, and this puzzles him since the Book of Spirits contains knowledge on all spirits. However, he notices that one page has been ripped out, and it talks about the Love Fairy Fran. Anos tells her of this, but he doesn't reveal his suspicions that she is the Love Fairy. Later on, Anos and his team are finally put through their first trial, which involves a written exam. But when the scores are announced, the 4 Evil Royals score below 90. However, everyone on Anos' team gets a perfect score, with Zeshia scoring 150 out of 100. Gilishris is angered by this, and he claims that foul play was involved. After inspecting the scripts, Gilishris finds questionable answers with someone submitting answers such as "I don't know" or a blank page. However, Anos tells him that before the era of destruction, even a blank page becomes a perfect score, because honesty was considered a great virtue. Anos cheekily asks Gilishris if he thought they wouldn't pass the test just because their answers are wrong, and Union announces the start of the second trial. However, Anos asks Gilishris to tell him exactly who he was working for since he had promised to tell him if he lost. Anos rightly guesses that Gilishris' boss is the Spirit King, and he asks him for the identity of the Spirit King. However, Gilishris refuses to tell him. At the Spirit Academy, Anos receives a signal from Melhais, who tells Anos of his plans to broadcast the Avos Dilhivia as a scam, and Anos is the true demon lord, but Nuscalia grins evilly as he watches Anos from a distance. Later on, Anos and the other students gather round in Union, who tells them that the next trial would involve the 20 stairs of Junior. Only one of them had a doorway with a staircase that led to the top of the building, and Union further reveals that each candidate was required to choose a doorway. However, opening the wrong door would lead a candidate down a bottomless pit. Sasha and Anos' fan club express their fear of dying by falling down a bottomless pit, but Anos devises a plan to save them all. Anos splits the source behind their powers evenly, and they all turn into his clone. While Anos walks up the stairs, he smiles to himself as he realizes that each of his subordinates could easily revive themselves if they fall into a bottomless pit, since his source would grant them the power of reincarnation. Lei and Misa arrive the right stairway and walk down the darkened hall together. They encounter Genel, the hidden wolf, who allows them to pass without harming them. Lei and Misa are surprised by this, but they walk out of the academy and follow the tumultuous path that leads to Aharthan. Anos finally arrives at the right staircase, and he is joined by Lena, who arrives through a secret doorway. He questions Lena on how she had winded up in the right room, especially after following the wrong path. But Lena reveals that she had regained memory of a secret doorway which was located at the passageway of every bottomless pit. Anos passes this message across to his subordinates and asks the rest of them to join him at the top. Anos walks down the hallway with Lena, and they end up at the Spirit Forest. He suddenly draws to a halt after sensing the presence of a boarder. Anos probes around the area for signs of another realm, and his search is rewarded as they discover the portal to another realm. After entering the portal, they are surrounded by lush greenery. Lena notices a grave and walks toward it. She further reveals that she feels sad for some reason, and she feels like she has a lot of things to say to the corpse in the grave, but she had no recollection of them. Calum Gis suddenly steps out of the shadows, and Anos is stunned by her appearance. He asks why she was revolting against the other 4 evil royals, and Gis tells Anos that she is annoyed with the spirits because Lord Kihilam has been spirited away under the orders of the Spirit King. Lena is puzzled by this revelation, but Anos explains to her that Kihilam Gist had a split personality with 2 different sources. One of these personalities was Lord Kihilam, but the second is Gist, his lover. but it would seem as though the two had been separated. Gist further reveals that the Spirit King is disguised as Avos Dilhivia and begs Anos to save Killam. Meanwhile, Lei and Misa are granted an audience with the Spirit King. However, the Spirit King refuses to answer Lei's questions unless he battles with him and manages to split his mask in two. Lei and the Spirit King attack each other head-on, but Lei is surprised at how the Spirit King predicts all his battle moves. Lei almost loses his life, but Misa rushes to his rescue and grants him the power of love, a power that he had never been privileged to use in his previous life. Lei manages to slash the Spirit King's mask in half, but the Spirit King doesn't honor his promise. Instead, he continues to attack Lei with the help of another villain. Lei is put in a disadvantageous position, and Misa changes to her spirit form to defend him. Lei is distracted by this, and the Spirit King seizes hold of him and Misa. While this occurs, Anos and Lena arrive at the doorway to a Hadern, but the hidden wolf Genel refuses to allow them to pass. However, he tells them that he would allow one person to go if they both defeat him. Anos manages to defeat Genel by seeing his true form, but Genel vanishes alongside Lena. Aegis orders Anos to follow the path to a Hadern, and he also promises to rescue his teammates. Anos is surprised by Aegis' kind act, and before he leaves, he tells him that he hopes they don't have to battle in the future. On his way to meet the Spirit King, Anos runs into Gilcerus, and Gilcerus claims to have discovered the equation behind all existence, but he further reveals that he plans on using this technology to kill him. However, Anos defeats Gilcerus with one fatal blow. Anos arrives at the presence of the Spirit King, but he is surprised to discover that Misa is not just the child of God, but her source had now been fused with the Spirit King's source to create Avos Dilhivia. Avos tells Anos that his plan to broadcast that he was the true Demon King had failed, and Anos was now stripped to a mere demon. After this mind-numbing revelation, Anos returns to his subordinates and tells them how Misa had now become the new Avos Dilhivia. Lei is depressed by this, as he believes that it's his fault that Misa had become Avos Dilhivia. However, Anos tells him not to fret and promises that they would get Misa back, but first, he had to find a way to defeat Ovos without hurting her. Anos and his subordinates return to the Spirit Academy for the third trial, but Inunion tells them that there will be no third trial, as he has been ordered not to let them go. Anos apologizes to Inunion for his intentions of hurting him, as he reveals he has no plans of staying captive in the Spirit Academy. Anos is surprised when Aegis Code suddenly appears and tells Anos that he has rescued his other subordinates from the hidden wolf. He tells Anos that some were waiting outside, and he reveals that others were on their way to Dilhivia. Anos thanks Aegis for his help and escapes with the rest of his subordinates. He runs into Lena on the way and asks her if she knows of any way out of the Spirit Academy, but unfortunately, Lena reveals that they cannot go down the same path. Lena suddenly has an idea to ask the spirits for help, and she calls Tithi and the other spirits and begs them to show them a way out of the Spirit Forest. The spirits reveal that the Spirit King had instructed them not to let them out of the Spirit Forest, but they're convinced to help them because of Lena. After they leave the borders of the Spirit Forest, Anos transports them back to Delsgade. Upon their arrival, Anos and his subordinates are forced to stay hidden. They overhear Elio Ludaul, a formidable demon general, as he asks his troops to capture the demon lord and his subordinates as soon as he runs into them, but Anos is not fazed by this, and he steps out of hiding and walks up to Elio. Surprisingly, Elio and his soldiers fall to their knees at the sight of Anos, and Anos is impressed by the fact that not everyone in Delsgade believes that Avos Dilhivia is the true Demon King. Elio tells Anos that the royals had gone berserk and were now hurting humans and hybrids. Hybrids were drained of their powers, and their power was in turn used to increase the royals' powers and keep the people under the influence of Avos Dilhivia. Later on, Anos' mother is seen worrying about him. She tells her husband that Anos was wrongly judged and accused of claiming a false identity, but her son has done nothing wrong. While Anos' mother runs down the streets in search of her son, she runs into Amelia, who is being attacked by some royals. Anos' mother steps in and the royals attack her, but Amelia shields her with her own body. Anos' father steps in, but he is hurled away by one of the royals. Just before the royals can make good on their promise to teach Anos' mother a lesson, Anos arrives and shreds the royals into tiny pieces. He further reveals that they would stay that way until the city was finally free from the clutches of Avos Dilhivia. At Anos' home, Misha notes how odd it is that his father is already up on his feet, especially after receiving such a grueling beating from the royals, and Anos revealed that he had imbued his parents and home with a protective spell, and they would heal almost instantly if subjected to any physical pain. Meanwhile, Anos' mother offers Amelia a bed to sleep in and food to eat, but Amelia protests against this. She is finally convinced when Anos tells her that the streets weren't safe that night. He also thanks her for saving his mother, and Amelia asks why he's being so nice to her, especially after all she had done in the past. Anos asked Amelia if she would like to become a royal now that she knew what being a hybrid felt like, but Amelia expresses her displeasure at the thought of this and bursts out crying. After Anos leaves Amelia, he tells his parents that he has some unfinished business to do, and he leaves them in the care of his fan club. Anos leads Sasha, Misha, Leia, and some other members of his team to a hidden corner of his house. He tells them that it would lead to the dungeon of his palace and asks them to accompany him to pick up his sword, the legendary Sword of Destruction. Anos and his friends arrive at his castle and Anos conceals their presence with dark magic, but on their way up the tunnel, they run into Revest, Ms. Menu, and Lady Luch, a member of the Spirit King's army. Anos is stunned when he notices Revest wearing the batch of hybrids despite being a royal, so he gently tugs on his shirt and calls out to him as he passes by. Revest asks Lady Luch if he can inspect the area a little longer, and Lady Luch instructs Ms. Menu to join him. After Lady Luch is out of hearing distance, Anos and his subordinates reveal their presence and Anos tells Revest and Ms. Menu of how Missa had become the second half of Avo's Dilhivia. He goes on to explain that whenever a half-demon, half-spirit child was born, their source was made with new rumors, and half of Missa's source was based on rumors of Avo's Dilhivia. He further reveals that to become the real Demon King, Avo's Dilhivia requires the legendary Sword of Destruction, which belongs to the true Demon King. Anos instructs Ms. Menu to look into the whereabouts of Avo's Dilhivia, Nuskelia, who was disguised as Erdo Maid. Revest offers to create a diversion that would allow Anos to grab his sword in time, and Anos warns him against it. However, Revest would not be persuaded against helping Anos. After Anos tries but fails to convince Revest against this foolhardy plan, so he decides to deceive Lady Luch by hitting Revest with a spell that could not be healed by magic. Ms. Menu calls for Lady Luch and tells her that the Demon King was now in the vicinity and he had struck Revest with a force so devastating that it would be hard to heal Revest with magic. Ms. Menu tries reducing Revest's pain, but Lady Luch asks her to leave him for the main time and inspect the area for the Demon King. After Lady Luch and Ms. Menu leave, Anos unveils himself and heals some of Revest's wounds. He also tells him that he would return soon to heal his wounds, but for now, he couldn't heal him fully because he couldn't risk Lady Luch discovering their treachery. Anos and the rest of his subordinates leave for the treasure room. Anos finally picks up his third, but before they leave, he tells them that he has to go back in time to 2,000 years ago and figure out why his trusted general Shin Reglia had turned evil. After they leap through time, they arrive in town and Anos reveals that he has to hide his source to avoid running into another version of himself, which was existent at this time. Anos and his subordinates walk around the village in search of Shin and Lady Lino, and they discover them in the town square. Anos smiles to himself as he realizes that Shin and Lady Leno had probably gotten close along the way. While they take a walk down the village, Zeshia tells Eleanor that she would like to buy Pop-Tarts, and they stop at a stall to get some. Zeshia ends up buying all the Pop-Tarts, but Leno arrives a while later and expresses her desire to get some as souvenirs for the spirits. Anos allows Zeshia to unveil herself, and she walks up to Leno and Shin and gives her 2 of her Pop-Tarts. Leno thanks Zeshia for her kindness, and she resumes her trip with Shin. Anos and his friends go back into hiding, and they escort Shin and Lady Leno to the Forest of the Spirits. After they arrive at the Spirit Forest, Leno is surrounded by fairies who tell her that the Forest of Spirits is being destroyed. Leno and Shin are attacked by a couple of wolves, but Anos and Misha help them from the background. After they were done conquering the ferocious beasts, Lady Leno stares in Anos' direction and realizes that there's a strange presence in the Spirit Forest. She asks the stranger to reveal himself, and Anos comes out as a Noshu political. Leno is amused by him cause he seems like he tells Leno that he owns a circus troupe, and they had been walking around the Spirit Forest to learn more about Lena. Anos asks Leno if she knows anything about her, but Leno refuses and asks Anos to see her privately. She tells Anos that they can stay for as long as they want, but he must never tell Lena of her true identity. Leno further reveals that Lena is the love fairy Fran, as she must not recall her memories or she'll fade into nothingness. While Anos and Leno discuss this, they're suddenly attacked by another monster, and Anos begs Shin to give Lei a sword. Shin initially refuses to give him, but he eventually gives Lei the sword. To Shin's bewilderment, Lei defeats the monster, and Shin asks why didn't he take part in the Great War. But Lei tells Shin that while he enjoys fighting, he hates war. Shin thanks Lei for his help and tells him that he can have the sword for as long as he's in the forest. The group presses deeper into the forest with questions on the unforeseen dangers that lay await in the Spirit Forest.